Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. So tonight we're going to talk about Gogmazios, and in the background is going to be the footage from the first time I successfully killed him on the campaign quest, so the one that you have some extra carts on. Not a clean kill at all, actually. I get all the way to my last cart before I finally managed to take him out. But I figured that would be the best one to put up, especially for people that may be showing up to get a little bit of advice, because they'll see that it's not exactly a clean kill on the first time for an average player. Now, a couple tips, because I'm sure people really want to hear that really quickly before I actually go into what my thoughts are on the fight. Number one, if you don't have both a fire and a dragon weapon prepared, you absolutely need to be going in with a dragon weapon. Dragon is way more important than fire, because in the last phase, you need to be suppressing his gaseous state. And by the way, see, isn't that quite funny? On my first successful kill, I managed to die to something that's really easy to not die to right at the beginning. Anyway, next tip would be just take in a bunch of really quick health items with you, like life powders, dust of life, that type of stuff, just in case you need to use them for some quick kills when he starts doing his ult in the third phase. That's a sort of easy way to buy yourself a little bit of time to get over to the shield if you aren't in a great spot when he starts on it. There was one attempt I had where I actually loaded down on things like mega armor skins, the heat resistance, and a couple other things where I was able to actually heal all the way through until the explosion at the end of it comes through, and that's just a one shot. But you can get starting out in a really disadvantaged position and have to sort of crawl your way across the screen until you can get to the point where you're safe. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, first phase of the fight here, don't think it's actually particularly difficult. If you can, try to lure him over to the rocks, and on the ground there are a couple of geysers that you can ignite with spark flints that you can pick up sort of near where I'm at right now. You can see I've got a torch pod on me anyway. But those do massive damage. I'm not sure if it's damage thresholds that push him from phase to phase, or if it is just straight up after a certain amount of time he goes. I'm pretty sure it's the damage threshold, and these little things, not 100% necessary, but they will push him through. Now granted, if you drop the rocks in the right spot or you set the geyser off in the right spot, you'll do some damage to a part that may make it easier to break that part later in the fight. So for part breaks, if that's what you're going for, then these may help. And that's sort of what I would look at these early phases for, is you're trying to build up damage on parts that you want to break later. See right here, I'm losing damage by being so far away. By the time I get back over there, I'm only going to land a couple of hits. Whereas if I'd kind of been sticking a little bit to him and just luring him as the opportunity presented itself, then I'd have been better off. You'll see the little blue circle armor looking things, like the thing directly in front of me right now. On successive attempts, once you've actually gotten your first clear, you want to break those, because those are the things that give you the materials to actually make the Gogma weapons and do some of your stat alterations there. But for your first attempt, just focus on killing. Wing arms are a good place to hit whenever you actually get the chance. Tail's a good place to hit. Head can be kind of dangerous to go for, but it is at least a spot that takes decent damage. Everything else is going to be very mediocre damage, but the key is you're just going to want to be getting in as much damage as humanly possible to push him through these phases. The second phase is really not that hard. The whole point of the second phase is to get the Dragonator knocked off of his back so that you can attach the energizers to it and then blast him for that 60k-ish damage, and pretty much once you get it off of his back and hit him with it, it's going to end that phase. At least I've never had him continue to attack for more than a half a second after you manage to do that part. And that part's really not that hard to do, so second phase is not that worth worrying about. Third phase is where things get a little tricky, and it's kind of split into two parts. One part is when he's not in his gaseous state and he's actually on the ground and you can attack him like normal, and you're wanting to really pump as much damage as you can get into him while he's on the ground. especially with your dragon weapon at that point. If you have brought both a fire and dragon, you probably should just drop the fire weapon for that particular phase and just try to get that dragon element pumped into him to weaken his ultimate attack. If you don't weaken it enough, it is a guaranteed one-shot every time it comes out. The thing is, well, I haven't actually seen whether it's worthwhile to grab fire element and use it to soften him and then boost how much damage you do. I'm betting, because of the way element tends to work, that unless you already have one of his weapons, that's not really that useful of a strategy, that you're better off just pumping as much dragon into him as possible. I'm not doing a good job on this, by the way, so clearly getting a clear is not that difficult. The challenge in the third phase is when he goes into the gaseous state, he starts flying. And unless you get really lucky, your main means of attack is going to be picking up these little things off of the ground that basically let you shoot lasers at him. Preferentially, you want to hit the wing arms, and hopefully you've done enough damage up to that point that just a couple of those pop of the wing arm is actually going to flinch him out of the air. Or, alternatively, you can watch for him to do this little shoulder ram move onto the ground that you will absolutely see later, and normally I screw up and get hit by it, so I don't really get to hit him with it, but if you can manage to not get hit by it, you can run up, and he pauses for a couple seconds before taking back off, and you can beat on that wing arm a bit, and possibly flinch him out of the air that way. The third thing is there's two pillars that you can pull down on top of him. However, I would recommend not using them early on in that phase, and instead waiting until you actually see the skull icon flashing on the minimap. Why? Because he seems to stay in that near-death state for an excessive amount of time, because he has a gigantic health pool, and I'm pretty sure the death icon is based off of percentage. So wait until that starts popping up, and then when you catch him near one of those pillars, pull it down on top of him, get the damage from it, plus knock him out of the air and be able to pump in some damage to get through that ult attack. Now, alternatively, if you're having trouble just getting past the ults in that phase in general, use them as you need them, just to push deeper into that phase. You never know, you may get enough damage in that you may push him through that last phase so fast you don't have to worry about saving it for the skulls. My damage output could just be low, but for me, I was trying to hold off on using them until it got to that point. One thing that also seemed to help me in that phase was I stopped really worrying so much about specifically hitting the wing arms with the little lasers, and actually just focused on being sure to hit him in general with them and try to land as many of those hits as possible. And I'm not going to spoil how the fight ends, but that ended up being a good choice. So, first phase, not terribly bad. This phase right now, which is the second one, I actually think is pretty cool, but realistically it's just meant to be a set piece moment. Oh yeah, as you saw just now, as soon as this phase starts, I would recommend going and grabbing the little boulders and just rolling them at him, trying to get a break on that wing arm to knock him down early on. And if you can't tell, he always has a sort of wound spot on the back. One thing I've been doing in recent runs is when he first lands, I'll pop a couple hits off on the back just regularly and try to sort of time it so that towards the second half of him being down, I go through and do the wound pop attack. That way, or focus strike, I should say. I should use the proper term. Use the focus strike after I beat on him a little bit. I tend to forget about the boulder until moments like this, but it does a great job of knocking him down so you can do that and get the gun off of his back. Continue taking advantage of him being down, but what I've found to be most useful for the actual weapon is go grab the one furthest away early on, take it, hook it up, and usually while you're doing that, one of the NPCs will grab the middle one, and then all you have left is the short one. It's important to remember that you can, in fact, dodge while you're connecting these things. So don't think you just have to kind of take the attack. Just hope that he doesn't hit you directly like he did me just then. And instead, if the pool starts to come around you, you can do the evade to sort of jump out of the pool. Now, I didn't follow my own advice this one yet again. This is my first kill, so a lot of this stuff is me telling you tips I've picked up later on. And it will just sort of take you on back to this area when that happens to you. I've had a lot cleaner fights after this that still resulted in carts, where I got to the last phase with all my carts, for one particular reason. If you cart to anything other than the ult in the last phase, be sure you've been paying very close attention to what he moves through. Now, you won't know this when you're first moving through that final fight, but there are signs that he's getting close to his ultimate attack. I cannot tell you how many times in attempts that I've run on Gogmazios where I've carted, went to run back in, and he's been in the middle of executing the fire attack. And even though we've done enough damage that I can see the dude standing over there holding up his shield and blocking the fire, there's just no way for me to make it to him, so I get 2 carts in a row. So the timing on getting back in there when he's doing that, you need to be paying attention. And if you see your character, like the NPCs, their health just ticking down really rapidly for a second, maybe give it a couple beats before you run back in to try to let that ult finish up. I don't actually know for certain that you can avoid it in the base camp. I would imagine you can on the off chance that you just happen to be there anyway. I don't know if you can farcast her out. That would be a pretty viable strategy if that actually works. I've not tested it out yet. I honestly, for some reason, don't want to. It feels kind of cheap, but at the same time, I guess who really cares if it is cheap? If it works, it works. Probably would be a lot more reliable than depending on getting enough dragon damage in to soften it up if it works. I don't know that that would be a reliable strategy in multiplayer, yet again, if it works. I haven't tested to see if you can even use them in this fight, but that's probably what I'm going to do after I finish this, fire it up, go into the fight, and just see if Farcaster works at a couple different points. Now, thoughts. What do I think about the fight? Well, I actually enjoy 2/3 of it. I really like this phase. I really like the beginning. Not quite. Oh yeah, it took me a second with what's going on right there to realize how I can actually push it around. I forgot that with stuff like this where it's been so long since anything was movable that you need to get behind it. Probably should have tilted it just a little bit further back, but more or less as long as he's somewhere in the reticle, it's going to hit him. And it's one of the coolest looking things in the game, to be honest. Now, anyway, I really like his aesthetics. They did a really good job updating the model. He looks cool. He looks intimidating. He is way more intimidating than he was in 4U. In 4U, it was actually a really easy fight. All you did when he was flying was you either used a ballista binder or there was one big sort of meteor gun thing that you hit him with it would knock him right back down. But it wasn't a particularly hard fight. It was just a fight where you had to know which steps to use the artillery and the cannons and which steps to actually switch to beating directly on him. So it was much more like a choreographed fight. You just had to kind of learn when to do what. So this one, it feels much more like a monster fight up until this point. And this is my only real problem with this fight in this particular game. I really, really hate the aerial part. It feels like it's too finicky to knock him out of the air. I don't know if I should be bringing a ranged weapon with me to try to hit him at these points or what, or if I'm just really shit with the slinger aim and I should just be hitting him right in the shoulder or something. But I'd cart more in this phase than I do any other point. As a matter of fact, at this point, I can pretty much make it through the first 2 phases with no cards and very limited item usage. This phase just wreaks havoc on me. That's the thing I was talking about with the shoulder check, by the way. You can catch him down there, manage to get over, get some good hits in, and actually prep him to be knocked out of the air. But man, I hate the aerial part. It doesn't feel like a fight at this point. You are really just kind of shooting him a little bit and hoping that the NPCs actually get enough stuff in to help you get him down. And then you have stuff like that happen where It looks like you're going to have a good moment to actually knock him out of the air, and it doesn't work. Or he's going to do an attack, and you whiff the laser twice in a row. And those lasers aren't infinite. Like, they don't just pop up all over the place throughout the whole time. You have to be doing enough damage to actually knock them off of him. Now, in theory, knocking them off of him is not that hard, but see, like, this is an attempt that I actually win, and I didn't quite hit most of those. So the thing is, without the extra attempts, I wouldn't have won this one. Now, granted, at least 2 of my deaths were completely preventable and just over stupid things, where I just was being way too risky that they wouldn't happen now. But he's just, you don't actually really feel like you're fighting him here. He stays up in the air, and moments like this just don't last all that long. Now, once you get him down, the fight goes back to being really cool. That's why I say about 2/3 of the fight is like 9 out of 10. That aerial portion is 3 out of 10. It's an interesting idea having the lasers and that you need to knock him out of the air, but in my opinion, it should have been, once you knock him out of the air one good time, he just doesn't go back up in the air. From that point out, it's a ground fight, and you can just beat on him and do what you need to do. Maybe they could increase the threshold of the amount of dragon damage that you have to do each time to prevent the ultimate from one-shotting you, to make it to where it evens out him not being in the air so much. But I don't know. That takes away from this being one of the best fights in the game to me. Now, I do feel like this is a good in-game fight. Me not liking that particular mechanic overall, even though I think most of it's a 9 out of 10, and I think that part's like a 3 out of 10, I'd still say it averages out to like an 8, not a real average, it's like a weighted average. I still think this is an 8 out of 10 fight. I think it's one of the best fights in the game. I kind of feel like Zoshia, as far as just mechanics and whatnot goes, was a more interesting fight. But for the only fight in this one actually labeled as an Elder Dragon, this one's really cool, and it's a good way to end it off. His armor is excellent. I don't really feel the need to even review it because it's such an overpowered armor set that while the actual full set's not necessarily the most useful, the fact that it has so many different set skills on it and it makes it blend in really well with the Gogma weapons, it's opening up the meta quite a bit, and that's really what you want to see out of new armor sets, that they open the meta. Now, with this fight having been released, I feel like it's about time to make a retrospective video and actually just talk about my opinions of Wilds overall. There's only really 2 fights left that they're actually going to introduce, but those are both AT fights. And I just don't feel like they're going to really particularly be that big of a fight. Like, they're ATs. They'll introduce new armor. That armor will probably have some useful parts for a couple different builds, especially with the Gogma weapons and Gogma armor introduced. But I don't think they're going to be anything as defining as Gogmazios. He is clearly meant to be the cinematic, epic endgame fight. I could be wrong. They could make AT Arkveld a absolute monster and make his set some sort of like ultimate fighting set so that it kind of reflects his flagship status for the game, but I just don't see that happening. I think it'll be a lot like the other ATs, where it's really just sort of a single step up from the 8-star ones, which I don't even think that they're actually all that harder than the 9 stars for most of the Arc Tempereds. They're interesting, but I think they're about on par with a 9-star Tempered, just regular version. Anyway, Gogma, good cap off for a high rank fight. I wish they would tweak this aerial phase just a little bit with some patching. If they would actually make it a little bit easier to get him out of the air, this would go from an 8 out of 10 fight to a 10 out of 10. Easy. Because it looks cool. The materials you get from it are cool. The armor's cool. I actually like the way the Gogma system works for Ardian weapons compared to just the baseline Ardian system in general. See, that's where I would have failed the quest in general, I think. If I we're doing this on a regular attempt. But anyway, overall I'm happy with it. So what do you guys think about Gogmazios? Do you think it's a good fight to end off high rank with, or do you think they could have done better? And what do you think about the Gogma Ardian weapons? Yet again, I'm satisfied, but I also am one of the handful of people that I really didn't mind the Ardian system to begin with. Then again, I played Gunlance, which is one of the only weapons where you actually got to play with a non-Ardian weapon. I guess I should expand on that just a little bit so that I just don't have a whole bunch of pissed off people arguing with me in the comments. I've seen a lot of people being like, it's a shame that we don't get to use a whole bunch of other weapons and blah, 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 blah. Let's be blunt for a second. By the way, this is a bad position to be in for this attack. You want to be on the outside of the tail, because when he does this thing that he's getting ready to do in just a second, you tend to get knocked down. And that can really screw you up as far as getting over to Fabius goes. And you see here, I'm trying to get to him, but I don't make it. I would have survived that particular attack had I actually been outside the tail where that initial laser wouldn't have hit me, and I could have started running a Fabius immediately. Anyway, back to thoughts on Ardian weapons. Every game, if it doesn't have an RNG system, ends out having a single weapon that is meta-defining. Realistically, having the layered weapon system does more to get people to actually go out and build more weapons than any of the previous game systems have. The reality is, layered weapons give you a reason to actually make all the weapons. None of the games has ever had a reason to make every weapon from every monster. None of them. Like, most of the older games, before you got to World and Wilds, there was zero reason to ever make anything other than a single weapon at endgame. Like, the new event quests and stuff that would come out with an event weapon, occasionally one of them would release and it would have an absolutely overpowered set or an absolutely overpowered weapon, and that one would take over, but it would still be just that singular weapon. This is not a new thing in Monster Hunter. So acting like there's a problem with Ardian because it's just the one is the wrong thing to really be focused on. The reality is there's always just been one. The RNG aspect of it, I get the frustration with that, but then there's nothing to do. The truth is you don't need the Ardian weapons to do the end game. I'm fighting Gogmazios with Guardian Arc Belt. If you get an absolutely god-rolled Dragon Element Gun Lance, at this point with the tweaks and the updates they've done, it can actually outpower Guardian Arc Belt. With Gogmazios weapons, they definitively overpower the Guardian Arc Belt stuff. But it's a similar idea. Like, the little bit of RNG gives you a reason to keep doing stuff. I get that bothers people that really want a definitive endpoint, but I kind of like the idea that if I want to pick up the game, I can do something that's still somewhat meaningful rather than just go into a couple random fights and put it down for 2 or 3 months. Like, it's very, very difficult to completely finish this game off, and that's fine. Like, it's not that difficult to get a platinum if you really want to set out to do the platinum, but it is very difficult to get every perfect in-game weapon if you actually want to get all the perfect in-game weapons. It wasn't really that different in World either, with the Safi weapons and Kulv Taroth and all that. They were a little bit simpler because RNG was just you got a complete weapon and it was either good or bad. With this, you get a base weapon and you just roll until you get enough combination of stats that you can actually be satisfied with. Or you roll the group set bonus until you get a group bonus that you're actually happy with. And this is one of those times where I don't know if I make it to Fabius. I think I do. But I'm pretty sure I just stay on my guy as a just in case. Alright. So, Ardian, it's not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. So, instead of putting that into a separate video, there it is. Anyway, next thing I'm going to do for Monster Hunter is put a retrospective video out where it's sort of a, here are my final thoughts now that the game is like 95% complete. I may wait until AT Jindahad comes out, since that's only a couple days from now. Give it a shot and see if I'm wrong, if they actually make it an even bigger upgrade than Gogmazios is. I just don't see that being the case. Anyway, we'll see what happens then. I'll let you watch the last couple moments of this fight while we finish it out in peace. But thank you for watching, and remember, if I can beat it, so can you.
Conduct evasive maneuvers! It's going to attack! Gogmazios' final form! Use every technique you know! Using the anti-wyvern gun! Magnificently fought, hunters. I've never been so proud. Each and every one of you is worth 1,000 of your peers.